Hi everyone, welcome and thank you so much for checking out my channel today. My name is Tanny and I am an independent author and somebody who really just enjoys a great story. So on this channel I talk about writing, books I've enjoyed, and lessons I've learned on my publishing journey. We are now a little more than halfway through the year, so today I thought it would be fun to do the mid-year book freakout tag. I'm not sure where the original book tag came from, so I don't have that linked, but I did find a list of questions on some other people's videos, so I'll just put those down in the description if you want to check those out. And I would really encourage you to participate as well if you feel so inclined. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just jump in. Question 1, what is your favorite book read so far this year? For this, I chose The House in the Cerulean Sea by P.J. Clune. I've talked about this book before on my channel, but it really, it just made me so happy. If you're not familiar already, this book follows a caseworker named Linus Baker, and he's a caseworker in this fantasy world. He works for the department in charge of magical youth. He is a very by-the-books kind of person, and he doesn't really have much of a social life outside of his job. He just lives alone, and he ends up going to this one orphanage where they keep kids who are really special and really kind of dangerous. At least that's what they think. And so his job is to go and inspect this orphanage, and while he's there he meets the kids and meets the caretaker of the orphanage, and you get to see the relationships that develop between all of the characters. And it was just a really positive, uplifting story. The characters are all just so endearing and so sweet and precious. I loved all of them. I really loved the kids. They're amazing, and I laughed while I was reading this. It made me cry in several places, and so I was really happy that I picked this one up. Question number 2 is, what is your favorite sequel read so far this year? That is going to be The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. This is a sequel to The Poppy War, and I read the entire Poppy War series this year, and it was really good. I enjoyed all of it, but I think The Dragon Republic was definitely my favorite. It really raised the stakes and delved deeper into some of the characters from the first book, and I really appreciated that. It's definitely not an easy book to read. The whole series is pretty graphic and deals with this big war that's happening, and so we're really looking at how war affects people and the ramifications of war. The main character is not particularly likable. She makes a lot of really just not the best decisions, and gets herself and her friends into some really dangerous situations. But you always understand why she's making the decisions that she makes, even if you don't agree with them. She's a very well-developed character, and I really enjoyed reading about her and following her throughout the series. Overall, it's a really good book, and I especially enjoyed The Dragon Republic and felt that it was a really good sequel to the first book in the series. Question 3, what's a new release you haven't read yet? So I am once again going to talk about Flamefall, which is the sequel to Fireborn. And if you're not familiar with Fireborn, it is kind of a story about a revolution that has taken place in this fantasy world, and the new leaders who are running the country are trying to do things better and do things differently. But as the story goes along, you kind of start to wonder, is this really better or not? We follow 2 main characters, and one of them is related to the old regime, and so all of his family was killed when the new people came in and took over. The other main character that we follow is someone whose family was killed and orphaned by the old regime, and they end up meeting and growing up together in this orphanage, and now they both are dragon riders in this new power system that has taken over. And the first book was really good. It was probably, it's another favorite of mine now, and was one of the best books that I read last year. And so I was really excited for Flamefall to come out and bought it as soon as I could. But then it's just been sitting on my shelf, and I really need to read it, and I really want to read it. I just haven't gotten to it yet. When I do read this, I really just want to take my time with it and sit down and really, really absorb it and immerse myself fully in it. And I just haven't had time to do that yet, but I really want to. I'm really excited to read this, and I will get to it eventually. Question 4, what is your most anticipated release of the second half of the year? For this one, I'm going to pick The Captain by Erin Michelle Skye and Stephen Brown. And that is going to be the third book in a series that I really enjoyed. It's a young adult fantasy series. The first book is The Wendy. I've talked about this one on my channel before also. It is an indie book and it's a retelling of Peter Pan, but the main character that we're following is Wendy Darling, and she is in the Navy and is constantly having to prove herself. It's a really good reimagining of the classic Peter Pan story, but it also kind of brings its own unique spin to the characters. I read and enjoyed both of the first two books in the series a lot, and so I've been really looking forward to the third book coming out. I think it's just going to be the 3 books. So it's supposed to release in December, at least according to Amazon. So I'm really looking forward to that one, and we'll definitely be picking that up as soon as it comes out. But if you guys haven't read this yet and you enjoy young adult fantasy and you enjoy fairy tale retellings, this is a really good one, and I would encourage you to check it out. Alright, question 5 is biggest disappointment so far this year. The one that mostly stands out was Wild Card by Marie Lu. I read Warcross and I really enjoyed that one. It's about a girl, she's a hacker, and she kind of gets swept up in this big gaming competition that takes place in kind of this virtual reality world that everybody plays, but there's this big competition and they think that somebody is trying to sabotage the competition, and she kind of just gets swept up in that and is asked to try to figure out what's going on and who's behind this and how to stop it from happening. But then we got to the second book and I liked most of the second book. It was fine. But then we got to the end and some choices were made in the way that things wrapped up with the ending that I just was left really dissatisfied with. And it's not that they were bad. Like, I think the ending was fine and it probably would work for a lot of people. It just didn't work for me. I think I wanted to see more like lasting consequences for some of the poor decisions that certain characters had made. And I just didn't feel like the ending really gave me that. It felt like everything was wrapped up a little too neatly. And so that really kind of soured my enjoyment of the book. But, you know, don't let that dissuade you from reading it. I think the ending works great for a lot of people. It just didn't personally work for me, and I was kind of disappointed with that. Question 6 is, what is your biggest surprise so far this year? That would be Educated by Tara Westover. This is an autobiographical memoir, and it's about this woman and her life growing up in this extreme religious family. They were preparing for the end of the world, and they believed that the outside world was a bad place and it's just full of sinners, and they didn't trust the government. And so because of that, they didn't want their kids to be educated in the public school system, and so they just kept all their kids home and homeschooled them. But she talks about how there wasn't really a ton of actual homeschooling that took place. It was very unstructured and there wasn't just very much substance to it. In her family, they never saw doctors or went to hospitals or anything like that because they just, believed that God would take care of it and he would heal you if he wanted you to be healed. And then as a teenager, she decided that she wanted to go to college. And she ended up going to Brigham Young University, which is a school here in Utah where I live. And then after that, she went on to receive more education. I think she has her PhD or something now. But because of that, and through that process of her seeking her education, her relationship with her family really changed, as well as her perspective of the world, and so she had to learn to navigate that. I don't normally read or enjoy nonfiction, but I was really captivated by this memoir. I think because of the lens through which I was able to view the author's life and her experiences. There was something about it that just really resonated with me, and I was able to connect with her story on a lot of different levels because of some of the experiences that I've had. Not that our lives are completely similar, and I want to get too personal with this, but she did grow up in like a really rural community in Idaho. I went to high school in a really small town in Idaho. She's also just a few years older than I am and attended the same university where I went to school for the first couple semesters when I was in college. It felt really real to me because as she was talking about, certain places and certain people, It was very much, I know people like that. I know places like that. It felt very familiar. She has talked about like still being estranged from her family and still being able to love people, even though sometimes it's better for you to distance yourself from them and to set good boundaries and to be apart from them. And I just think that that's such a valuable and powerful message, and I really just appreciated her story. And again, it really resonated with me in a way that I really wasn't expecting from a nonfiction. Question 7 is, what is your favorite new author? And it can be a debut author or somebody who's new to you. I had a hard time picking somebody for this one, but I think I'm going to have to go with R.F. Kuang, who wrote The Poppy War and The Dragon Republic that I talked about a little earlier. I'm not sure that I've read enough of her work to call her like a favorite author, but I do think she has a lot of potential to become a favorite author, and I'm really curious to see what she does next and what she writes next. I'll definitely be checking that out. Question 8 is, who is your new favorite fictional crush? I am just going to skip this question. I don't really get crushes on fictional characters, and I can't really think of anybody in a story that I've read this year who would qualify, so we'll just skip that one and move to the next question. Question 9 is, who is a new favorite character? For this one, I'm going to go with Julian Diaz from Cemetery Boys. So this book is a young adult fantasy, and it is about a boy named Yadriel who is trying to prove himself to his traditional Latino family. Yadriel is transgender, and his family's had a hard time accepting his gender. And so in an effort to prove himself, he goes through this ritual and attempts to free the ghost of his murdered cousin, but things don't exactly go right. And instead he ends up summoning a different ghost of a boy from his school named Julian. And then throughout the rest of the story, they're trying to figure out both what happened to Julian and what happened to Yadriel's murdered cousin. Julian kind of has this bad boy reputation and is just known for being the bad kid at school. He gets into trouble a lot. But then as the story goes on and we get to know him better, we see that he really is a good kid and he has, just a really big heart. I saw a lot of the kids that I work with in Julian. The author has confirmed that Julian was written as having ADHD. And oftentimes kids who have ADHD, and kids of color especially, are often mislabeled as being, the bad kids and troublemakers, especially in schools and other institutions where really they maybe just need, support that they're not getting, or they just need a different way of doing things, a different way of learning. And it's not that they're bad kids or that they're acting out on purpose. They just don't know any other way to deal with the situation. And I really just love the author's portrayal of those things and of Julian as a character. I have such a soft spot in my heart for him, and he was so well written, and I really appreciated his character in this book. He's definitely a new favorite character for me. Question 10 is, what book has made you cry this year? I have 2. I have one that made me cry happy tears, and one that made me cry sad tears. So the book that made me cry happy tears was Seize the Stars by Mary Fan. This is another indie book, and it is the 3rd book in the Starswept trilogy, and it follows this girl named Iris Lee. She is a young musician, and she plays the viola. She attends this really prestigious school where they are training for places to compete on this alien world. Things on Earth have kind of deteriorated. People can't really have a good life on Earth. It's really hard. A lot of people are just scraping by. And so for her to have an opportunity to go and play music on this alien world is really important for her. Once she gets there, she realizes that things are not perfect there at all either. And I've really enjoyed this series from the beginning, and so it was really exciting to me to see everything play out with this last 3rd book and to have everything resolved in a way that was just so satisfying. It was a really hard journey for the characters, and things still aren't perfect by the end of the story, which I also appreciated, but it was just so, it just was such an emotional ride, and so to see the way that everything played out by the end, I loved it so much. And then the book that made me cry sad tears was The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. It is about this boy named Todd. He lives on this planet where people have gone and settled, and the town that he lives in is only men. and they have this noise where they can hear each other's thoughts, and there's no women in the town at all. Something has happened to the women, and we don't really know what has happened at the beginning of the story, and then we kind of slowly start to piece that together as the book goes on. This is a really fast-paced book, and there's a lot that happens, and I won't tell you what part made me cry, but like, if you don't cry at that part, or don't feel at least a little bit sad, there's something wrong with you, because it was devastating and awful. But despite that, it's a really good book and one that I would still highly recommend. So, pick it up if it sounds interesting and if you don't mind being emotionally devastated by your stories. Question 11, what is a book that made you happy this year? For this one, I'm going to choose Shadow of a Dead God by Patrick Sandfire. This is another indie book. We follow this wizard named Nick. He's not the best wizard. He kind of just lives this really crappy life in this really poor, awful area of the city. And then he and his friend end up being swept into this murder that happens, and they're being accused of committing the murder. And so he has to prove himself and his friend innocent before his friend is executed. And so we follow him as he's trying to solve this mystery and figure out what happened. And he just has a very sarcastic, humorous way of telling the story and narrating all these events. And he can't ever catch a break. And it's very sad, but it's just so funny because just the way that it's described, it's just really funny to watch him bumble around and stumble his way through this mess. And it was a really good read, and I'm excited to see what happens next for this character. There is supposed to be a second book in this series, so I will be looking forward to that and hoping to check that out. Question 12, what is your favorite book to film adaptation so far this year? I really enjoyed the Shadow and Bone Netflix adaptation. I'm sure you guys have heard of that already and seen it floating around, but it is based on the Shadow and Bone series and the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. Both of those are YA fantasy series. They're both set in the same world, but follow different sets of characters and take place at different times. I think I actually enjoyed the Shadow and Bone part of the story in the TV adaptation better than I enjoyed the books, so that was kind of fun. And Six of Crows, it's hard to really make a judgment about that because the show hasn't caught up to the books, but Six of Crows is one of my favorite fantasy series ever, and I think that so far they've done a really good job with the characters and doing justice to the characters and to the story, so I'm excited to see what comes next and how everything comes together. Question 13 is your favorite review you wrote or video you created. So I am brand new to this YouTube thing, and I've just been having a lot of fun with it, and I've enjoyed creating a lot of different videos. But I think one of my favorites was the anticipated indie releases that I did not too long ago. I will link that if you want to check it out. That one was just me getting to talk about all the indie books that I'm excited to read later on when they come out. So if you enjoy reading indie books or you're looking for some new indie books to add to your TBR, I would encourage you to check that out. Many of them are not out yet, but there are a lot of first books in series that you can check out in the meantime while you're waiting for the sequels to come out. Question 14, what is the most beautiful book you have bought or received this year? So I recently picked up this beautiful Tales of Japan book, and I want to shout out my friend AJ Torres. She has a YouTube channel as well, but she had posted on her Instagram a copy of this book that she had. And I immediately was like, oh my gosh, that's the most gorgeous thing I've ever seen. I have to get it. If you don't know already, I lived in Japan for 3 years when I was a kid. And so I really love Japanese culture and Japanese stories and mythology. There are a couple of stories in here that I've heard of or am pretty familiar with already, including Momotaru, which is the story of the Peach Boy. And there are these really gorgeous illustrations in here as well throughout the book. And I love illustrations in books. I'm not sure when I'll get around to reading this one. I'll probably try to read a story here and there throughout the rest of the year, but I'm really excited about it. It's so pretty, and I love it. It's very, I don't know, it's obviously kind of sentimental and nostalgic to me too, just because of my experiences of living in Japan. But thank you, AJ, for showing me this. I'm really excited to have it and excited to read some of the stories in here. Question 15 is, which book do you need to read by the end of the year? This one was hard for me because I have a lot of books that I want to read by the end of the year, but I'm going to go with Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I have heard really good things about this one, and it looks really interesting to me. I don't know a ton about it. I did read the blurb. I can't remember anything about it now, but when I read it, I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. It sounds like something I'd enjoy, and I've heard a lot of other people talk about it since, so that's one that I'll probably try to pick up before the end of the year. It sounds really interesting. And that is it. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a thumbs up, and feel free to leave a comment below as well if you've read any of these books or if any of them sound like something you want to check out. If you want to see more of my videos in the future, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so that you can get notified when those go up. Thank you so much for being here and for watching this video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.